Hey there, it's Silver. This is Bullet Heaven. So this time I wanted to take a look at two different games in the genre that were a lot more simple than some of the stuff I've previously covered, with fewer mechanics and just a general kind of old school simplicity about them. And, of course, two that were both pretty new, or entirely new. So the first one is this, Skybreakers. And Skybreakers is going for sort of like a top-down, old-school action RPG kind of feel. It's extremely fast, to the point that I almost feel that watching this game is going to be harder than playing it, just because while playing it, it's a little bit easier to keep track of what's actually going on, since you're the one controlling it, but just passively watching it, it can get a little bit busy. But I will say at least that is a point in the game's favor, that it's not so visually busy that it's easy to lose yourself if you're actually the one playing. So the way that it works is you will choose one of 4 characters. You only have one unlocked at first, but as you ascend through the difficulties, you'll unlock more content. And each character is sort of a kit. They have a primary combo attack with some sort of finisher at the end. They also have a dash, and the dash is more than just to dodge things. It also has an attack tied to it that's different for each character. And they also have an ult that they build up over time and can unleash on the right click whenever they have it. When you start a run, you'll also be able to choose an artifact to start with, and these often have some sort of positive and negative effect to them. So they're sort of like little build changing options that you can choose at the beginning. At first, you'll only be able to choose one, and you'll unlock more of them as you go through the difficulties, and then eventually you'll unlock a second slot, so you can have 2 of them at once. And then right before you start, you'll also get to choose a weapon, and these are also unlocked as you ascend the difficulties. And this is where a lot of the depth for the individual characters comes in, because every character has 10 different weapons, but they're more than just stats. So they have a basic weapon that they start with, but they also have 9 others, and 3 of them modify how their dash attack works, 3 of them modify their basic attack combo, and the last 3 modify their ults. So choosing one of these is sort of like choosing a build in a sense, because it determines what you might want to focus on or how a specific part of that character's kit is going to work, which I do like. I think that's a good idea. It adds a lot more depth to the characters if you have these options of changing around some of their kit and making it work a little bit differently. Once you're in battle, a bunch of enemies will spawn and a timer will start to count down, and the goal is pretty simple, just survive. Enemies will spawn in and you will kill them as fast as you can, and once the timer is empty, all the enemies on screen will die and you will go to a sort of a transitionary phase in between waves, and you'll go to the next wave, and so on until you ascend the waves far enough to get to a boss, and eventually to the final boss, which is usually around wave 20. Each wave is going to consist of quite a few different enemy types, which is another point in the game's favor. It does have a lot of different enemies to face, and as you ascend in the difficulties, you don't just get harder enemies, but you also get entirely new kinds of them, which I like, and also new backgrounds, so that it doesn't get too samey. And after a wave is over, you'll get some experience, depending on the number of enemies you killed, as well as some gems that you can spend in a shop in between waves. And the experience is important because it levels you up, and as you level up, you will get the ability to purchase some passive upgrades, and each character has their own unique list of upgrades that links into their kit somehow and changes how it works. So you may have a character that can spawn all sorts of wind blades that bounce around the arena, and then maybe they can get some passives to direct where the blades converge on, depending on if they crit or not, or something specific like that. Or you may get a character that follows a golem around, and you can change what benefits being in the golem's radius actually gives you. So yeah, it's nice that each character has their own specific set of upgrades and they don't share them at all, so they're all unique. That does help them feel a bit more fleshed out. And the shop that you'll access in between waves is also very important, because you can have up to 4 sets. You actually don't just purchase things, you purchase sets of things. And you can have 4 sets, but you can have as many individual things in a set as you can buy. And all of the purchasable upgrades of a set will be themed around what that set does, and then eventually, once you get 5, 9, and 12 purchases of each set, you'll get these ascending set bonuses that will empower you along that theme. So for instance, the Confucianism set, most of the purchasable upgrades you'll see are based around combo, like building a certain amount of combo or getting bonuses like attack speed or attack power bonuses at certain combo thresholds. And then all the set bonuses that you'll get from collecting multiple of them are based around that thing, like for instance getting extra combo whenever you gain one, or causing a bunch of slashes to appear all over the screen and hit all enemies visible once you get to certain thresholds and things like that. So that's how they all work. They all are based around a certain theme, and once you collect enough of them, you get sort of powerful set bonuses that match that theme. Every certain number of waves, you'll also be able to modify your weapon. You'll get a second currency called Dark Iron, usually from killing like elite enemies, the enemies with health gauges. And you can use these to forge your weapon in order to improve its capabilities. So every time you forge some iron into it, it will increase its base attack, but it will also gain some progress to unlocking a new sort of passive enchantment. And there's a chance that whenever you do this, the enchantment will automatically appear instead of having to fill the gauge up by forging multiple times, but the chance that this happens decreases as you get more and more enchantments on the weapon. But eventually you'll be able to fill up every slot and have a powerful set of enchantments that improve your capabilities in some way. You can also choose to reforge a completed slot in order to just get a different bonus if you don't like the one that's currently there. And then eventually, once you're happy, you can choose to spend some of this dark iron in order to just directly increase the attack power and nothing else, so that you still at least have something to spend it on once you've completed the enchantments that you want. And then eventually you'll gather all these level up bonuses, these purchased shop set bonuses, and all of your increased weapon enchantments and things, and you will face off against the bosses at the ends of, I believe it's usually wave 10, 15, and 20. And I will say the boss fights are actually pretty good in this game, like unexpectedly so. They have a fair number of attacks and patterns and stuff to learn. They're a little bit bullet hell, actually. And all this makes them more interesting, perhaps, than the usual sort of elite enemies that usually have 1 or 2 attacks to learn, but the bosses are a lot more involved, so I appreciate that. And of course, the big final bosses on the wave 20 threshold are usually even more involved than that, and they have like 10 health gauges, and you got to be on your toes for those. And the game does get really hectic and very, very fast, as you can probably see in the background. Things really zip around the screen at super high speed, and you are encouraged to dash all the time. Considering every character has an attack mechanic of some kind on their dash and gets various benefits from it, you do need to actually time it right and use it well as an offensive tool and not just as a dodging mechanic. And you do have a certain amount of stamina that you spend whenever you dash, but you can actually continue to dash when you're out of stamina in order to dodge things, but it won't do the attack. So whatever offensive power it's supposed to have, you get fatigued and it won't work, so you can only use it as like an avoidance tool. Overall, I'd say it's a pretty interesting take on the genre. I think it's a fun concept because of the way that all the characters are very different from each other and play completely differently, and have those different sets of weapons that alter their kit in various ways that make them more interesting. I think that's a good idea. I would like to see the level up upgrades for each character be a little bit more interesting. Some of them are pretty cool, but some of them are kind of boring, and I think it would benefit the game a lot if you had more of a sort of powerful and interesting assortment of these upgrades that you earned by leveling that really helped to define what each character is about. I think there's a lot of room there for improvement in terms of making these really fun to use, and I also would like to see more different themed sets of stuff to purchase in the shop, because the ones that are there are actually really fun and tend to make a pretty big difference, so having a higher variety of them would be a pretty cool thing. But overall, I'd say it's a pretty solid setup for a really simple kind of top-down hack and slash. And the other one I wanted to take a look at this time is Witchcraft Survivors. This is a much more traditional Vampire Survivors-y formula, only instead of vampires, everything is sort of magic themed, and all of your characters are mages of various kinds that have a large assortment of spells that you can collect in order to make yourself stronger. The overall aesthetic that this game has is really endearing to me. The way that it looks, it reminds me of like a sort of mid to late 2000s Flash game, and I say that with love. Like something that I would be playing in the background of chemistry class after we were done titrating a solution. It just has that kind of vibe to it, and I appreciate that. I think it looks pretty adorable in that way because it reminds me of something that you would see in like 2008 era Newgrounds kind of. And I think it actually benefits from that because everything is magic themed. This means there's a lot of colorful and creative particle effects happening, but the screen still has to remain readable through all the huge particle spam. So you need this sort of colorful but succinct and relatively simple style, I think, to make things look pretty and vibrant, but also still readable. And the way this one works is pretty simple. You simply level up by killing enemies and gathering gems, and every time you level up, you'll be able to choose from a couple of different things. And the way this works is you have one sort of long list of items, and this will contain your spells and the artifacts that you choose. So you don't have like a limit on how many weapons versus how many passives or anything like that. They're not separated. You have just one long list that contains all of them, and you can have as many as this list can hold. Every character has a completely different set of spells that they can level up and obtain, and this means that every character sort of has a couple of different builds that they can possibly go down towards, which I do like. I very much enjoy in Survivors-like games like this where characters have very build-specific kits to them. I think it's more fun to have characters feel very different from each other and have some stuff that's unique to them. So the fact that this has an entire set of spells for every character that's different, unique to each one, I think is a good idea. And they're all, of course, themed from like the Fire Mage to the Death Mage to the Ice Mage. And to the game's credit, it does have a pretty significant list of spells for each character. There aren't only like 4 or 5, there are like a bunch, more than you can usually hold actually. And they each of course have several different levels that you can ascend them through, which will give them greater power in some way, make them larger, make them fire more projectiles, make them pierce enemies, various things like that. And they are pretty fun and creative, I think, and there's a lot of interesting particle effects and stuff on display when it comes to like late game, having all of your spells going off at once. You have like this storm of stuff on screen that's themed towards your character, which is, it's fun. It makes you feel powerful, you know. It's nice to achieve this crazy magical power where you can just like destroy everything on screen easily, but it is actually a pretty tough game as well, I will say. Partially, I think it's because you move very slow by default, so walk speed upgrades are extra important in this game, in my opinion, because once you get to the later waves of enemies, especially past like the first big boss at 10 minutes, you will find that enemies get pretty fast, and if you can't keep up with them, then you will die very quickly. The levels are not infinite, they do have borders, and they also have various features that you can come across, from things like these big demon altar things that have a big radius around them, and if you get in the radius and start killing some enemies, you'll sacrifice the enemies to the altar, and once you get about 100 of them, then you'll gain the ability to choose this sort of cursed upgrade. It will have some sort of very powerful effect, but it'll also have a downside, and you gotta choose whichever one you think would be best for your character at the time, or you can just choose to ignore this altar entirely if you don't think it's for you. There will also be some chests that spawn occasionally, usually somewhere far off screen, so you've got to actually make your way over to them and survive long enough to open them, but you do open them as soon as you touch them. You don't have to like chill around them for a while or anything, and they usually include some gold to spend after a run, as well as usually like a magnet power-up, which is always handy, and sometimes you'll also find a treasure rat, which is a giant rat that tries to run away from you that basically acts like a treasure chest as long as you can kill it in time. And then, of course, at certain thresholds of time, big bosses with health gauges will spawn, and these usually only have a couple of attacks to take care of. They're not too difficult as long as you have the right move speed and are able to kite them effectively without getting caught by large waves of enemies spawning from off-screen. Then they're usually pretty straightforward to take down. It's just a matter of battering their health gauges down in order to actually win. Once a run is over, whether you win or lose, you'll go back to the menu and you can choose to spend the gold you obtained on some overall upgrades that improve everyone, you know, like extra attack power, extra move speed, all that stuff. And there are also some more exotic upgrades that you can eventually get for very large amounts of gold that you probably won't be earning until you get to the later levels and the higher difficulties. But also one thing I do like is the fact that each character has sort of a talent tree. Just by using a character, you'll obtain some experience for them, and that experience stays with them once they go back to the main menu, and you can spend it on upgrades unique to their own sort of little talent tree that all converge up to one big major talent that usually improves that character in some major way and has some sort of minor spillover effect for all your other characters as well once you purchase it. So overall, this is a much more simple experience. It doesn't have anything like evolved weapons as far as I know, or like evolved spells in this case. And although it would be cool to get some evolved or combined spells that allow you to achieve some new heights of power, that would be a lot of fun. But aside from that, it is a pretty enjoyable, if simple and kind of casual take on the Survivors formula, and by casual I don't mean easy, just that there's not a whole lot of like interweaving mechanics to worry about. It's pretty straightforward, but it manages to do it pretty well, I think, and with this sort of endearing art style and the creativity on display in terms of all the different spells and the fact that each character plays very differently, it makes it worth trying out if you're a fan of the genre, and if you're like me and you tend to enjoy like magically themed things. I'm just a fan in general of being able to sort of play a game in the genre that's themed entirely around gathering spells and magical powers. It's sort of a fun idea. So I will link you in the description below this video to the Steam store page for both of these games if you wish to check them out. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.